founding partner of speedinvest. And I'm an American. I grew up in the United States. I went to engineering school in California, but I spent a lot of time in Europe. And so the title of this discussion is, thanks for the seed capital, what happens now? Normally, after seed capital, you get an A round. But having worked in Austria for quite a few years, I see that there's a lot of very interesting things happening here. But the title of the talk kind of sums up a problem. There's a really good foundation that has been laid here. If you look at European statistics, you look at the percentage of university graduates in Germany, in Austria, and Switzerland that study science, mathematics, engineering subjects, it's almost double the percentage in the United States. There's really good technology. There are good engineers here. There's plenty of grant money. There's a lot of money to get you started. It's good to see the Wirtschaftskammer. It's good to see AWS and FFG here, the finance ministry. There's a lot of support from the government to try to build up the ecosystem. There are hacker spaces. There are co-working spaces. There's Sector 5, there's Spengergasse, there are all kinds of things. And what that's built is something that, I've seen double in the last year. There are 800 little startups running around, like 5-man teams with a beta that have gotten a little bit of money. Sometimes they have, sometimes they haven't, but they're kind of at that level and they're doing something interesting. It reminds me a little bit of like the Mesozoic period. Like there are a bunch of microorganisms running around, but what are the conditions that you need to do something bigger, to build something larger here, something interesting? I don't see a lot of A rounds happening, and we've got some guys here who will talk about that and who come from much larger funds. I want to get their perspective on what they see needs to change here. In terms of structurally what needs to change. Can the government do anything? Can university R&D departments, private partnerships? What do investors need to look for? How do they need to change their models? So I'm going to introduce the panel here. So you know me, this is Alexander Galitsky. He's a partner in Almaz Capital, a very large Russian fund. He's also on the board of directors of the Skolkovo project, which I think most people know what that is. It's a hugely ambitious, kind of tech city being built outside of Moscow. Kind of build it and they will come. Max Niederhofer from Accel Capital. Obviously, everyone knows what Accel is. Giant fund. Markus Wagner from i5 Invest, which is a local, very, very successful incubator. And then Jan, who comes from Credo Ventures out of Czech Republic, a little bit like me, a smaller, localized fund. So you get a really broad perspective and a lot of opinions on what needs to change here. I'm going to maybe open it up with Markus and kind of ask you, from an investor's point of view, and working hands-on with a lot of companies here, what do you think we could do better in Central Europe?
From my perspective, the most relevant part you need is to be able to build up a great team that shows traction. And quite often you can see that the first problems come up in the first part in building up a great team. So the HR component is very critical. What also is very relevant, I believe we need to be realistic. We are based in Austria, you're based in Czech Republic, so we have a different ecosystem around than in the Silicon Valley, than in, for example, London. So you need to adapt in terms of the business model, pick also the right business model you're going to start. It would be great if you could build a Google in Vienna, but the chances are not too high. So you better look for the right model too.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's always an HR gap here. I see a lot of really good technology, but there aren't a lot of serial entrepreneurs. They haven't been like multi-generational entrepreneurs, IPOs. So there's always like a big learning curve. Max, I'll ask you, what do you see the problems are here? I don't know that Accel is investing a lot, like doing A rounds from smaller companies, high growth companies in this area. And if you do, it's like Chris, right? Curiously, just they move to London. They have to become like a London company or Silicon Valley company.
Not necessarily. So I think we do a lot of A rounds. So the perception of Accel is slightly, because we do these large kind of $20 to $50 million checks. As well as the early stage capital, the perception is kind of we are a growth stage investor. It's not necessarily true. We do a lot of kind of between $3 and $10 million. For us, the A round traditionally has been in companies that are that have a ton of traction already, right? That are doing millions in revenue, that have millions of users, high engagement, and so on. I think we never force companies to move, but some companies just need to because of the markets they serve or the type of people they want to hire. I have been very impressed, especially kind of in CEE, with the type and the quality of company that's being built that is actually able to scale. And that is absolutely true for kind of domestic e-commerce champions. It's very true for gaming companies that are doing well worldwide. You know, Wargaming in Belarus is one of the largest gaming companies in the world. No one has enough capital to acquire these guys because they're so damn successful. So I think, you know, there are many exceptions to what we just outlined. And I'm kind of sick of these structural discussions where we kind of take a look at the ecosystem and say, okay, what needs to change in the ecosystem? You know what? I think we need to build great companies. And this whole problem will go away if we build 1 or 2 great companies per geography.
Okay, understood. Jan, maybe get your perspective a little bit. I mean, you're from, you know, a smaller, very regionalized fund. How do you address some of these challenges?
I actually think that our situation is a bit different because of the history of our region. And one thing that I appreciate a lot about those quite big number of seed capital and all the initiatives supporting very young startups is that it builds the community and gives example to young people that entrepreneurship is actually a way how to build money, not to get employed by large companies, which is still the #1 choice for students in our region because of the history. For the younger ones here, we've got communism some 20 years ago in our countries, and entrepreneurship did not exist at all. So I still feel that we need to somehow fight with that history in the back of our mind. And considering all these facts, I actually think that the number of A rounds or Series A investments in Czech Republic, Slovakia, and other countries from the former communist bloc is quite okay. And the only thing we just need is time. That we must come over that and learn more people that entrepreneurship is a good thing.
Sure, understood. So I don't know if I totally agree with the getting away from the structural discussion to say build really good companies. You look at the history of Silicon Valley, it started with the Stanford Research Park, right? And there are a lot of kind of structural things that are put into place that facilitate commercialization. University IP, I mean Stanford, there are a lot of things that happen there. That's a huge generator of interesting IP and spin-off companies built through public-private partnerships that were organized, right?
Do we have too much government involvement in Europe, not too little?
I don't know that it needs to be any more, but I think it needs to change. Yeah, it needs to change.
Organizers.
Yeah, I think there could be an adaptation of the culture. I want to talk to you, Alexander, and let you speak a little bit, because this is like a huge structural project, right? This is like, build good companies. Maybe it's like build it and they will come, right? The Skolkovo project is hugely ambitious. This is a giant structural undertaking. Maybe you have a few things to say about that and how that works.
First of all, I would like to make a few comments. East, former communist country, as we told, it is stop to speak about it. It is already 20 years gone, more than 20 years. It means that new generation of people already born who never saw this. So by this way, I think it is excuse to get more money to invest from government. It is a good to sell to government idea. We still fighting with communism. I will tell you that Roman Stanek from Prague, he never asked any money for his 3 startups from any government. He just successfully, he is my friend, he built just successfully company straight from Prague and achieved pretty good results. So, but this way it is I agree, it is built good companies, first of all. The second one about structure, everything. Yes, Skolkovo is a huge project, but it was started as a virtual project, first of all. This completely virtual project. Still today, it is only one campus built today for Skolkovo, but today in Skolkovo already 700 companies registered and many of them got grants. What government did, they not invest, they given grants, which is good. They don't have any string attached for property, for anything. So they just would like to build entrepreneurship. I don't know how other government can do, but it's the right way to do. At least it is broad, very big activity, and people started to build companies. And even US companies right now, who cannot raise capital possibly there, try to build something in Skolkovo. So one more point, from day one you need to think global. If you don't think global, forget, you will never get money for next year's step. If you're not open some mama papa shop in some street in Austria. So if you would like to build some company, go and build global. And from this point of view, many Russian companies, hidden of course, it's a Russian companies. But Evernote, who uses Evernote? It is a Russian company. Who uses Acronis? I don't know. It is a Russian company. Who uses Parallels? It is a Russian company. It is which built and started in country independently from government, independently from anything. Today, in this current world, I have in portfolio company Gelastic. Company started by 3 guys. They worked 3 years in different city, in 1,000 kilometers from each other, prior that they went to raise capital from venture capitalists. So it is modern world. It is forget it about government, forget it about many things. You just need to build great company. It is where I agree. And in this case, you will go to raise capital very easy on stage A. And I don't know what means anymore stage A and stage B.
Understood. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I would also like to shift the discussion a little bit and maybe see, there are a lot of things like what investors need to do, what startups need to do. Building great companies is pretty obvious, but in some of these smaller markets, are there things that investors need to do? I know there's a very different perspective from, say, a $100 million fund or a huge network of funds. And then, I've got a $10 million fund, Credo, I think, is a similar proportion. We have to take a really different focus. We have a totally different risk profile. I can say, from my perspective, investing here, what Markus says makes a lot of sense, and I'm going for a lot of base hits. What I see that works in this region, I gave a talk last night, are companies that are sitting on excellent IP, small teams that can be kind of forklifted into the US market, and they have differentiated IP and something that competes on a global level. And I can say Germany and Austria have a disproportionate number of companies that are like that. There's a lot of talent. The other one are kind of small players that have an adapted business model where you can kind of forklift them into another a niche market in the U.S. and they're already relatively mature, and you would go for a fairly quick sale after growing them up. I don't know, Markus, do you have anything to add about how companies should adapt their business models? What succeeds in this region?
I would again boil it down to the question of the team. I believe very much that the team is very relevant. You can have a great business model, like a copycat model. You have seen it's proven in other markets, and have a medium type of team, and somehow it will work out. If you're trying to build up something original, you need to have really the best guys on board, because they will figure out something is wrong, it doesn't fit into the market, it doesn't fit to the investment landscape. We need to be more global, we need to be more specialized, whatever. So the question about the team is the most relevant one, I believe. And that comes back to the question of HR and how you get the best people. And that's one aspect which is so key that you need to put a lot of energy into it, especially if you come from a small market, right? If you want to build a consumer-focused company in Austria, you need to have the best UI designer, the best in Austria, because you're competing against companies who are in the US and they are better UI designers, right? You need to have the best engineer working on it. And if you can group that type of team together, and that's what we also do as an incubator. We do have a trainee program, we do have an entrepreneur in residence program. We try to get the best designers and the technicians. And then those teams do have all the capabilities they need to adapt their business model. Obviously, you can give input to it. And one of the aspects you have mentioned is it's easier for us having track record already, but for a team of 2 people or 3 people, they need to have a little money at least, and that's where the public grants come in. And I think we can be very happy here in Austria to have an FFG and an AWS and that infrastructure. I think they help, but the rest is basically brain work and teamwork.
Understood. Jan, do you have something to say about this? What is your focus? What do entrepreneurs have to do in Prague to make these kind of things work, and what do you see the companies having to do in a pretty small market?
We like the deals where the company has something really especially in the IP, so a real piece of technology that can be used, because we feel this is a strength. As you said at the very beginning, in this region, the technology background is quite strong, and we've been able to find already one company in our portfolio, and we're looking at some of them. And I believe that these companies have a good chance competing globally because of the special IP. So again, we're at the quality of the team, quality of the people, and it can be just on the technology side. And we try to add them the value and the movement, how to sell outside their home market.
Understood. So, I mean, you guys are kind of in a totally different position, right? You make investments of a completely different range. You have a probably much broader deal flow than we look at. Do you have any other recommendations other than build great companies? Do you see anything that you'd like to see happening in this region, right? It's going to increase your deal flow, increase the quality of companies that come out of it, that you should see investors and entrepreneurs doing here?
Right, so fundamentally, I don't have an agenda here. So build great companies, which is kind of like the macro headline, and then we can go into the details of how that actually happens. I think from an entrepreneur, so I was an entrepreneur until last November when I sold my last company. So I've done 3 startups. Accel invests between 500K and 50 million, so we're very stage agnostic. We care deeply about understanding the segments we go into. I think from an entrepreneurial point of view, if we should answer the question of, I'm in this region, I have seed financing, what am I going to do now? I think the best advice I can give you is what I did with my last company, which is do not depend on Series A financing coming through. Because we are in a period of history where there are so many early stage companies getting. I have friends who are at Blackstone, 5 years in private equity, they're going out and founding consumer internet companies. These guys don't have an idea of what they're doing, right? I mean, they'd be much better in business development at Spotify or heading up kind of product management at Rovio and actually getting some hands-on experience. So these guys are out in the market, and they're the ones you're competing with, and they talk a very good talk, right? They're Harvard Business School educated, they talk like management consultants. They're going to be raising millions of dollars before you engineers are going to do it, and you know what? Their company is still probably going to fail, right? So my advice would be to you is you've gotten a couple $100K, get your product out the door, figure out with your customers what it is your customers want, and start selling and try to bootstrap as much as you can. And you know what? Once you're profitable, you're in the best entrepreneurial position you can ever be in. Because you can turn around to me and I will knock on your door and you can say, I'm very sorry, but we're not open for business today, right? And the entrepreneurs that don't want to talk to me, they're the entrepreneurs that I most want to talk to, right? So I think it's very hard advice to give someone, but what you should be doing is trying to get independent on your own 2 feet and don't depend on anyone else giving you more money beyond a seed business angel round.
I totally agree. So this is 100%, and this is something where I think where you choose in this region, it's really, really important where you choose to get your capital from. What kind of a seed fund that you work with, what kind of incubator that you work with, because you're going to have to. It's very likely you're going to have to survive for a long time on your own wits and your seed capital and building up the business. So I think what Markus said. What I want to stress is that there's almost always an HR gap. Investors need to get hands-on in this region. Seed stage, super angel investors need to roll up your sleeves. You can't just pass out your business cards. You need to get really operational with the companies in this space. The kind of typical 2 and 20 model just doesn't really work. Making introductions doesn't work. It's not enough. And I completely agree. That's what you got to do. You got to survive on that money, and you need to find the right partners who can help you grow the business to the hands-on. Alexander, what from your experience, what works in Russia? It's a completely different kettle of fish.
Possibly, but again, in Russia, from one side, Russia is a big market for internet, but for any way I pointed for that we invest in companies which are targeting global market. Since Russia, for point of view from usage of IT, it is only 3% of all market. If you compare to any other country, even in European country, it is still very little. From this point of view, it is main point is bootstrapping. It is every company which you take in my portfolio, they was almost bootstrapping, and always everybody didn't want to get money until they understand they need money. I built 5 companies in my life, and from this experience I will say, yes, I don't like to have investors, I hate them. So in general, sometimes I fight with myself, I hate myself as a time investor and not entrepreneur anymore, but from point of view that if you would like to speed up your growth, you need to get money. And investor money very expensive. So you need to trade what you would like to achieve and what you have in your pocket. From other side, I will say that when you would like to get money, you need to be pretty focused what you would like to achieve with this money. Many entrepreneurs come in with any knowledge, so they have cool product, especially after seed stage. They have cool product, but they don't know what they can achieve. And the second one, they actually sometimes don't know about their market at all. So yesterday, even listening to some presentation on the judge jury, I found that many guys don't know market, they don't know competition around. And it is very surprising to me, since it is what you need to start when you build something. If you find some problem, you need to know who is solving this problem, and better to combine your efforts with somebody else if you target in the same direction. So it is what entrepreneurs need to learn on the seed stage, especially to understand all this competition environment. And target at the biggest market, since you need to anyway. I don't know how many companies started from day one from one idea and they kept this idea forever. Many companies turn around. You need to have ability to have and look for the big market. It is the reason why you need to have a global idea. As speaking about Russia different from point of view that Russia has a lot of money. No capital, but a lot of money. It is different point, capital and money. And from this perspective, many guys build their companies without any venture money. And it is still possible. You go on digital river, you go anywhere, especially if you're building software, to achieve $3-5 million sales, you don't need any presence anywhere. You just can do everything from home. That's all. It is specific of Russian market. We have 50 companies with whom I'm speaking day to day, and they don't need money.
Sure. I mean, you see that a lot in this region as well. I mean, it's not necessarily rocket science to get up to a level. I see lots of companies that are kind of 2-5 million turnover and are relatively stable and have found a niche market. But what if, Max, what if you get a company that's built a great product, they're growing, and they are a prospect for investment by, you guys, DFJ, somebody. What happens, what happens then? You said they don't necessarily need to move away from Austria, but I mean, what would be their strategy? I've taken a few companies that are kind of fast growing, to Sand Hill Road, and American investors where you really want, if you want to go IPO, if that's your goal, if you got something that's building so quickly, you think you're going to build the next Facebook. American investors hate German board meeting minutes. They don't like Austrian law. It almost seems like it's inevitable. You got to just forklift it and take the whole team out to California.
Nobody likes Russian law for sure.
So I disagree with the forklift kind of imagery, right? Because you don't really do that. I mean, even when we invest in Russia, like anyone who actually, when Russians invest in Russia, they don't invest in the Russian company, right? They invest in the Delaware or in a Cyprus entity or some other entity that then controls the operating company in Russia. So, I mean, there's no problem for Americans or UK investors or someone else to build a holding structure that they understand and that the entrepreneur understands, and everyone has counsel anyway. So I don't think that's really an issue. So if you take some examples of stuff we've done, so we invested in ClickTech, for example, in Sweden, which was a software deal where they were doing a couple million in revenue. We helped that company set up a sales office in the US. We helped them recruit top talent that was operating out of that office in the US. And the company is now public on NASDAQ with a market cap of $2 billion. So this stuff kind of does happen, and happens relatively frequently. Oftentimes when you're in consumer internet only, you don't really know these examples, right? You only know Spotify and Rovio. But like Sasha said, like there's big companies out of Russia, like, you know, who knows parallels here, right? Like, you know, there are big companies that are being built in the background, and I don't think you need to transplant the team. I think we're very fortunate that we are actually able to hire engineers in young companies in Europe, because if you're in the Valley and you want to hire a top engineering talent, I mean, good luck, right? That's what you need the millions of dollars for. In Europe, you can actually pull it off by convincing someone that yours is a much more interesting company to work for than, you know, the boring local corporates that we have.
Okay, I'm going to go back a little bit to the smaller funds and get your perspective, Jan and Markus, on sort of what you look for in companies within your particular region. I mean, I know when, you know, the investments that we made over the last year, I'm kind of looking for a couple of particular things that I know work. And when I take a lot of companies in the U.S., there's kind of a formula that works. What do you guys see as, you know, how should companies in this region adapt their business models so they're interesting for seed stage, you know, or super angel range funding bodies?
I so much agree with Max and Alexander's statement that revenue is one of the best funding sources ever, and that you need that flexibility. So if your model and your mindset, and that also needs to be part of your personal mindset, is your company needs to make money, not that you want to make money by selling the company itself needs to generate revenue and EBITDA. And if you're a type of a person, and I boil it again down to it's a people business, a type of a person that wants to sell and is able to sell. And here we do have a slight disadvantage to US mentality, I believe, because in the US, sales is something positive. Everybody sells, right? The engineer sells, he gets like a bottle of champagne if he sells well. You don't have that here. Good teams are people who want to sell something and who are able to sell something. And good business models are business models where you can sell something quite early in order to not be dependent on the funding source. And that then is interesting for us also because of the fund sizes we have locally. It's like the speedinvest and your fund. It's not huge, so you can't sign tickets 2 million plus. So you need to have like a good situation and a good funding situation yourself. In order to be able to survive, and once you are able to get the money, you don't need it anymore. Best situation ever.
I would add something to what you just said, that the companies have to have a mentality to sell, and that mentality has to be with the founder. At our stage, I haven't seen probably any successful example of a seed, super angel stage of the company where they would be able to grow by hiring new salespeople directly, where the founder does not have a mentality to sell. They must be able to start and initiate the selling process by themselves.
Got it. I mean, I personally, I agree. I also find that I really like a technology advantage. I like finding teams, you know, hardcore DSP engineers, something really low level. I find it's harder for me to scale up a company or do something that's kind of consumer internet, another Android app. That's difficult. You're competing on a global level with really good teams in Silicon Valley and everywhere. So this is what I see in terms of good deal flow in the region. You know, kind of leverage your rocket science. In terms of culture, I think that's a really good question too. You know, from what I see being American, I see that there's been a lot of changes over the past couple of years. I've been coming to Austria. I don't see that big of a difference in the attitudes of entrepreneurs here. They, you know, people have an accent, but they're kind of driven and you know have a lot of the attitudes that are good for, you know, for building a business. Do you guys agree? Do you think that people need to change? Do Austrians need to become better salespeople?
I don't really like the culture discussion because, let's face it, you know, we're not the mainstream culture, and I think you're probably right in saying that entrepreneurs here resemble entrepreneurs in the US more than they may resemble culturally kind of people in the mainstream of society. I think we have two problems. The first problem is that a lot of the raw processing power, so the intellectually good people in all of the countries we're working on in Europe, are not yet considering startups as a career move that is beneficial. You know, so they're staying in their consulting companies, they're staying in investment bank, they're staying in their corporates. That's bad, and that needs to change. The second thing is we have a cultural fear of failure, right? That is very ingrained, and you know. the most stressful times for my mother have been when I was running a startup, because she was like, can't you just do something normal like all of the other children? I think we have that, especially with engineers. It's hard to get engineers to quit a well-paying job to join a startup. At the same time, this stuff is changing because people are realizing that, actually it's important to do something good with your life. Why build a supermarket when you can build a supermarket chain? Why work on something small when you can work on something that is globally meaningful? So I think it's changing slowly. I don't know. I think, again, with these things, ignore it, execute, right? So, sorry, that's me.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I mean, Alexander, the Russians need to completely change their mentality as you move east? Does it become more difficult, or does it matter these days?
I will say is that in 10 years it is a huge change in Russia from point of view what to be entrepreneur, since in the past time it is in many places. Since that when some lady introduced her boyfriend to her mom and he is entrepreneur, mom thinking he is without job. Yeah, so like why she married him or meeting with him. So from point of view of right now mentality change, and I will say with all programs which boosting money, it is where possibly government need to initiate, and even back to Silicon Valley history, government invested in U.S. government in 1970 invested in Silicon Valley $4.5 billion, and private business only $100 million. So back in 2007, approximately 2008, government will continue to invest approximately the same amount of money, and private business $32 billion. It is what everybody needs to understand when they would like to. It is long-term program to create entrepreneurship momentum in some place. If you would like to achieve it, you need it. But more important to understand, it is very difficult to work with government money, since the government money, it is actually tax money. Tax money, it means that everybody who you meet on the street and invest wrong, they look on you as a bad guy. When you invest private money, it is a risk taken by people who gave you money to invest. It is a big difference. So in Russia, people started to understand this. So some momentum created, but I will tell that Russians always was entrepreneurial, since we all went to the east from west to east for huge countries. So you need to be very entrepreneurial to go to Siberia and live there. So.
Okay. And so I want to...
Actually, my first business, I started when I was 13 years old, but I produce electro guitars. We started to play, but possibly not so nice, but we started to produce electro guitars. No electro guitars was in this time in Soviet Union. So, and after 50 guitars we sold, we were stopped by police. Private business was illegal. So, but we didn't went to jail since we was too small.
So I think it's pretty clear in the cultural discussion. A lot of people that I work with in Austria, the startups, everybody's been to California. A lot of people win the Go Silicon Valley initiative. You kind of know what it takes. You know how entrepreneurs work around the world. There is one bit of the cultural discussion I think is kind of important, and I see there's a huge difference. If you look at someplace like Stanford, right, where you have like university accelerators, and you've got people like university research departments, you've got chambers of commerce, you've got funding bodies, you have entrepreneurs who are really on the same page and cooperate and work really well together. Stanford is a huge generator of wealth in Silicon Valley. Huge support for companies, puts companies in touch with private enterprise, and facilitates the growth of a lot of fantastic IP. I don't see that so much here. I see that there's a very different kind of academic culture. I see that university professors are a little bit wary of working with Intel. They don't want to corrupt the purity of their research. I don't see everybody getting on the same page, and I think that's a place where the culture is a little bit weird. Sasha, do you see that? I mean, how does that work in Russia? It's kind of a structural discussion, but it's an important one.
Well, it is a problem for any European country, I think, and for Russia as well. In Russia, in past time, universities never produced any research. The target of universities was to teach students something. Today, problem with Russian universities, last two, after graduation school, it is that it is no professors who know modern technology, who know industry influence. So it is a lack of Russia today, and I recommend for anyone in Russia to study in top universities after 4 years to go to some Western universities, especially US universities, to study. So same for research. Research was done in Soviet Union in the so-named research institutes, which is gone actually, since it was where students went to work for last 2 years, where we got the industry practice. And right now it just doesn't work like this. So my recommendation is that that Europeans need to learn how to do it. I think in Cambridge program was pretty good. In UK universities it is workable. In other universities which I saw in mainland, I will say, it is a problem. So since professor working as a professor, they never targeting to teach people or students how to start company or thinking together with them what can be done from this research, from this knowledge base. That is what I can tell.
I think a couple of very brief perspectives. One, because of the dearth of funding to the university systems in all European countries, we're seeing professors and departments being forced to work with private companies. This is unilaterally a good thing, right? So exactly like, they're getting more influence and they're actually pushing research toward the right things, and students get to learn applied science rather than, the stuff out of textbooks. The second is, I actually disagree. I think we have plenty of kind of, university commercialization kind of incubators, accelerators. I think we don't have the density of the Stanford ecosystem, and which is too bad, but we just don't have it historically. But if you look at Oxford, Imperial College, University College London, Cambridge, a lot of the German universities, we have this stuff where we take IP and commercialize it and try to help students. And, is it high quality? Not so much, but it's getting there. And then the third and final perspective is that university, I think, is universally overrated as a step in a person's life, right? Looking at the workforce today and where we're headed, your degree is not an insurance of anything. And I'm like a big believer in the Peter Thiel model of get people out of university early and get them working on stuff that's actually interesting, rather than drinking beer for 4 years and coming out with a bachelor or master's that's practically useless. So I really think, again, maybe the best time for your first startup is, during university, right? Because you don't have many responsibilities because your cost of living are low and so on. But I'm just hesitant to put that much emphasis on university, because the IP that I've seen come out of universities, we're not talking life sciences, material sciences, nanotech, that's different. But if we're talking about kind of software and software-enabled services, I haven't seen that much great stuff come out of universities.
Understood. I mean, I would disagree. I would consider like biotech and things like that. I think what they do at Harvard. I think Cambridge is a great example. Oxford sucks at that kind of thing, actually, and a lot of UK universities they're not nearly as good as Cambridge.
No, but the Oxford Entrepreneur Society, or whatever it's called now, it's phenomenal. And they've actually launched a couple of companies that are really doing well. So what they don't do is they don't have great research that they then put out. But I think the mentality is great.
The mentality is good. I think they're not very good at soliciting private partnerships. They don't like to ask for money. I mean, there is a different culture there. It's England, right? It's not Harvard. It's not Stanford.
Russia signed an agreement with MIT and pay a huge amount to MIT to create actually an IT program. And now the new universities, they are targeting to get endowment $1 billion in 1 year. So any professor who would like to go to work to Russia, you're welcome. You will be well paid and have a pretty nice life, I will say.
And whoever's managed that endowment in Russia also is probably having a pretty nice life.
Obviously, you can complain about the education system here, but on the other side, you can be very practical and just like manage to deal with it and make the best out of it, and that's the way I think it is. And if you're an entrepreneurial, spirit-minded person, then you find your peers, the ones who would also be very successful in Harvard, Stanford, and so on, and team up with them, and then like found a great company that does revenues. So you can't excuse always on the education system, and we can't change it in the next couple of years. So we need to find a way to deal with that.
Yeah. So I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping up here. I mean, just kind of one more pass and sort of closing statements. What is, you think, the most important thing that you want to see happening? We'll go just across left to right in this area to facilitate the growth of better startups and startups that can scale and go international, go after something beyond the seed stage. Sasha? What is the number one thing that you would like to see change in your region to facilitate the growth of startups beyond the seed stage?
For Russia, it is very simple. Open border, yes, so to travel much easily.
Good answer.
I'll happily send a letter inviting you so you can get a visa for anywhere you want. I think if I could have one wish is that you guys stop founding consumer startups, because I know it's all you know, and e-commerce looks like easy revenue, but you know what? Like, go work in an industry and understand what the problems are, and then actually solve someone's important problem. Preferably someone who has a lot of money, you know, and will give you the money to solve that problem for them. So really, like, do B2B, do software, do something interesting, not like the 10th iPhone app that's trying to, you know, build a certain marketplace.
E-commerce, since it is require $100 million.
That's mine as well. I would totally agree. The companies that I love working with and where we get the most traction stuff, it's rocket science. It's leverage, you know, your strengths as engineers, and do something interesting. Yeah, not another Android app that helps you find parties, or, you know, Pinterest for cat lovers or whatever. So.
I'd like to see more companies that put a focus on revenue, and then I want to see that they are getting bought by other companies. So I believe exits, let's say 2013, if we can see like 10 exits in Austria happening in the tech scene, that generates business angel money, that generates serial entrepreneurs, that makes people greedy and ambitious to start the next company, and that makes Markus also be interested, because they don't need to talk to him then, because they have their own seed money. And I hope in a year from now we have 10 exits more here.
I believe that for our region we need more role models, so successful people who made an exit, and kind of start new ventures in our region with the people here.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That wraps it up, and thanks a lot for listening.
We still have time for questions.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And do we have any questions from the audience, please?
I see some changes in the VC industry. One, the contribution from the government suggests at least in the US that there's a lot of money available. And on the other side, the second part is the Kickstarter. There's providing funding. And I wonder what impact you now have for plus I good news companies what impact
What was your point about the Kaufman report?
So one of the takes from the government report was, from my understanding, that there was more money available, sufficiently allocated for VCs.
Well, you know, so this is a high-risk, high-return business. You expect the returns to be highly skewed. So you expect the majority of people probably to lose money, or at least not make a lot of money, right? Accel is in the fortunate position of being the group that make a lot of money. That's kind of perspective one. The second is, I love Kickstarter. The thing is, you know, is going wild, it's printing money, it is funding projects that would not get funded otherwise. And that is, if the Pebble watch thing, like all this stuff, you know, VCs would not touch with a barge pole. But once you've gotten like $1 million or so to set up that project from Kickstarter, and you're actually able to convert, and you're actually able to show, look, there's demand for it, and we already have the prototype in the market. And now all we need to do is, you know, another couple million to scale it to mainstream, and we have stores interested in everything. Fantastic, right? So actually, I think as a funnel towards venture capital for businesses that are not fundable in the earliest stages, phenomenal. Well, I mean, so I think because you already, if you weren't running your own company, I would say go work for another company for 6 to 12 months, right? Or do an internship or whatever, you know, suck knowledge out of it that way. In the absence of that, you need to do customer development in, you know, in a kind of scientific Eric Ries sort of way, which just looks at, you know, how are people using it, you know, what are their processes. Hopefully you can get people to spend time with you, but that's, you know, it's the hallmark of a good entrepreneur. They get people to do stuff that they wouldn't ordinarily do, right? So I think go out there and try to talk to as many people as possible.
Does it answer your question?
But now I'm being judged on the quality of the answer?
Yep. Okay, that wraps it up. Thank you very much.
Give it up for a great round.
And have a great show.